Good morning, good afternoon, buenos dias, wherever you're logging in from. You're very welcome to the World Habitat Awards winners presentation. My name is David Ireland. I'm the Chief Executive of World Habitat, and I'm going to be your host for the next hour and a half. The World Habitat Awards have been going for many years now, bringing you innovative solutions to the world's biggest housing challenges. And I think it's fair to say in the last 35 years, those challenges haven't got any smaller. It can be overwhelming to continuously read about the scale of the problems our world faces. But I think the awards give hope. They give hope for two reasons. One, because it shows there are people out there who know how to solve these problems. And hope two, because it shows that these problems can be scaled up to become global solutions to these big challenges we face. I want to give you a couple of quick examples. A few years ago, we awarded two projects for what was then a new and innovative idea for ending homelessness called Housing First. We've also awarded a number of projects using the community land trust model for helping communities develop their own low-income, low-cost homes. Both of these ideas have gone from being pioneering innovations to becoming globally recognised responses to the housing crises we face. And we look forward every year to similar projects which can become such global solutions. I hope too that the World Habitat's own programmes have helped increase the pace of that adoption. I want to say a quick bit about UN Habitat. A thank you to UN Habitat. World Habitat and UN Habitat are of course separate organisations, but we've partnered together on the World Habitat Awards since the mid-1980s. In every year prior to this one, UN Habitat has provided the platform for presenting the awards at one of their events. For reasons that are all too familiar to everyone, that's not happening this year. But I do hope that the next 90 minutes will more than compensate for that. We've got a really interesting hour and a half. We're starting with a film which gives you an insight to showing what these amazing projects have done and why they have been awarded. And many of the people that you see in that film will then be joining us, and you'll hear a bit more from them directly. And there'll also be an opportunity to ask questions. Welcome back. I hope you found that inspiring stuff. I'm delighted that we are now joined by some of the people who you saw on that video. We've got, first of all, a couple of speakers representing the two Gold Award winners that you saw there, Aga Khan Agency for Habitat and Newcastle City Council. And we're then going to have a response to those from two of our judges, who I'll introduce in a moment. And then after that, we're going to go to our outstanding contribution award, Techo, and a response from them as well. So please keep your questions rolling. Please put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll come to as many of those as we can. Onno, can I hand over to you for a few comments?
Thanks, David. It's really fantastic to be here, and it's so great to see the film and also to see the other awards. It makes me even more excited that we won, because the other projects are so fantastic. I just wanted to focus on one thing which is really important for us, which is the concept behind what we're doing. You know, I think all of us know that climate change is a fact. Not all of us, but most of us know that there's already well over 100 million people whose habitat is threatened because of climate change that has already happened today, and therefore are thinking about moving or whatever else they need to do. Now, many people know that that is about coastal communities and island populations, but there's less awareness of the fact that in the high mountains, people live on the front line of climate change and are in the same situation. And those people are the people we work with in northern Pakistan, also in Afghanistan. Even today, we still keep working with them, Tajikistan and other countries. And it is a really important concept to understand that we have been working with these populations for 25 years, building indigenous knowledge and learning how to map risk and mastering GIS at the local level, geomapping, so that we could understand risks. But as the situation became worse and disasters became more frequent and more impactful as a consequence of climate change, His Highness Aga Khan challenged us, and he said, the skills that you have developed, you shouldn't just try to use them to help these people you work with survive. You should actually use them to look forward, to plan, to think long term, and actually help them thrive. Because the people in the high Himalayas, Hindu Kush, Pamir, Karakoram mountains, they are the custodians of that important part of the world. They're the custodians of the water towers of Africa. They are the equivalent of the polar bears and the penguins of the North and the South Pole, but they are people. And we need to make sure that they can live where they live. So what have we done? We have combined that indigenous knowledge with increasingly sophisticated mapping technology. And we have done things like buying drones to map glaciers and glacier melt, using satellite data and using satellite imagery and now artificial intelligence, partnering with many institutions all over the world, because our logic is that a girl that is born somewhere in the Geyser Valley in Pakistan has the technology to understand what she can aspire to because she has a cell phone. So what is the moral justification? She cannot thrive where she was born in her ancestral land. And that's why we try to bring world-class planning and construction practices to these remote mountains. You've seen how beautiful it is in the film. It is just an unbelievable place, but it is crucial that we work to allow these people to build a better future where they are and do what Switzerland. It's taken 300 years, but it's now some of the richest parts in the world. 300 years ago, everybody would have said to Switzerland, don't try that, you won't succeed. Now people think it's even silly to ask the question. So we want the same for the mountain communities in the Himalayas, and we will stay there and work with them until we can. And we're extremely grateful for the recognition, because this is a problem that is all over the world. There's 1 billion people in the world who are in broader mountain areas, and we want to learn from others who work there, share our knowledge, and make the conservation and improvement of the habitat of mountain communities an important driver in the fight against climate change and the fight for climate adaptation. Thank you.
Oh no, fantastic. Thank you very much. I apologize that I didn't introduce you properly at the beginning, but Onno Rule is the first general manager of the Aga Khan Agency for Habitat. And Onno, there's something which just struck me with what you just said, and particularly the comment that you made quite starkly, I thought, in the video about, you know, this is not to be dramatic. This is just what will happen. And I think there's whatever countries manage to achieve in terms of decarbonisation. This is happening anyway, isn't it? This is not a potential risk. This is something that is happening to these communities, even in the best case scenario. Is that right?
Sadly, yes, that's right. We can't reverse what's already happened, even if we started zero emitting as a world today, which of course we're not capable of doing. These glaciers are melting, the weather patterns have changed, the system has destabilized. And all we can do is adapt to that reality and work to protect the communities. The good news is that we actually have the technology, the skills, the knowledge, and the will of the people to work with. And it is not impossible to build even a better life. It just requires a really focused approach, and that's what we're trying, and gladly what World Habitat recognized.
Fantastic, thank you. Stay with us, Onno, and I'm sure there'll be questions later on. I'd like to hand over to our second panelist today. Neil Munslow is the Service Manager in Active Inclusion at Newcastle City Council, where you've worked, I think must have been all your working life, Neil. And I think the project that you lead is one that we have been very taken with, and the concept of prevention of homelessness, I think, is one that it really needs more prominence. Neil, can I hand over to you for a few comments?
You can, thank you, David. And I was struck there by the contrast between the challenges in England and Pakistan, but also that the impact is similar. If you lose your home due to a natural or social disaster, and a reminder that we all need somewhere to call home. We're honoured for World Habitat to shine their light on Newcastle, and with the connections World Habitat brings to help us share and find solutions together to the world's housing problems. There are too many people to thank, but I would like to just mention Councillor McCarthy, you saw on the film, for her leadership and vision, and also to all the people who kept all our services operational throughout the pandemic. It feels like we've just started, but it's been 19 years since the Homelessness Act 2002 required UK councils to develop a strategy for every 5 years to prevent homelessness. We're not the only place to do this, and we don't say we've solved everything, but we have had some positive impact. Over the last 8 years, over 24,000 cases of potential homelessness have been prevented, and now we have no evictions into homelessness and an offer of somewhere safe to stay for everyone. We've seen the benefits for residents in reducing uncertainty and for the council in reducing transaction costs and in not having to use bed and breakfast. £142 million was spent in England in 2019-20, a 430% increase since 2010-11. Newcastle has not used bed and breakfast to meet its homelessness duties since 2006. We've seen benefits in rebuilding credibility and faith in public services by stopping a problem like debt becoming a crisis like homelessness. We've seen benefit in changes to our culture from responding to crisis to preventing crisis, which leads to the question, what could have been done to prevent homelessness, which leads to partnership and to considering upstream responses, and then to it being everyone's business. This then leads to looking at the structural, systemic, and the individual factors, which force us to move from the generalized to specific responses to everyone's risk of homelessness. This helps us to remember there's a person at the end of the strategy, not just a budget setting process. For Newcastle, the core of our challenges relate to poverty and looking at prevention in the context of it being everyone's business, which means considering fairness and affordability, going from collection to connection, and converting rent collectors to financial inclusion officers to help, not punish people when they face hard times. Joseph Rowntree in 1902 said, if we can make an example, others will follow. And Your Homes Newcastle, who manage our 27,000 council homes, is at the core of our examples. In 2008, they evicted 197 households, and we started our prevention from eviction protocol, looking to mitigate financial challenges. Last year, there are no evictions. We're extending the example to our main housing associations, and this starts to become a rights-based approach that considers fair and consistent approaches to affordabilities. And the methods that we've used, key to our approaches, are feedback loops and testing and learning how our services and homes work in meeting our aim to prevent homelessness. For example, Your Homes Newcastle have 70 officers to support financial inclusion. We have 800 self-contained rooms to respond to crisis. I think it's worth remembering that no amount of resource allocation methods and strategies make up for a lack of resources. You'll have seen Cherry Tree View on the film, which is our emergency accommodation for homelessness. This came out of passion and learning and thinking about the impact environments have on helping people move forward. We have our quarterly politically led routine reviews where everyone in the city has an opportunity to help us identify the risks of homelessness and to adapt our policy and provision to mitigate those risks. We have structured governance systems for collaboration. We have panels that bring together the partners in the city to make collective decisions, compromise and learning to better respond to the challenges our residents face. We think that there are elements that can be transferred regardless of the difference in resources. The principles of working to understand demand and to match supply accordingly, and constantly testing the efficacy of our policy and service responses, using case finding and using forbearance, going to the people who we think are most likely to need our help rather than waiting for them to come to us in crisis. And we are looking forward to developing our knowledge exchange programme with the Design Council and other partners to consolidate Newcastle's approach to preventing homelessness that has evolved over the last 20 years, and using design principles to make this transferable. We will build on the foundations of our homeless prevention work to extend the principles to other anchor institutions, particularly to health and social care. And we have a commitment to strengthen our rights-based approach to preventing homelessness. I hope this talk gives you something of the flavour of how we have, as Munai said, adapted and adopted and tried to find different solutions to our residents' housing problems. We know there is much more to do, And we are very grateful to World Habitat for creating the conditions for us to learn together. So thank you, and back to you, David.
Fantastic. Thank you, Neil. There's lots of questions which I'm sure people have from that, and please do keep your questions rolling in on the Q&A at the bottom. Neil, please stay with us, and I'm sure I've got some questions to put to you in a little while. I'd like to introduce the first of our judges of the awards. Christophe Lalande is the lead housing specialist at UN Habitat and is part of the advisory group which helps shortlist the awards each year. And Christophe, I know you've seen all of these projects as they've gone through the system, but I'd be very grateful for your comments on the last two that we've just heard about.
No, thank you very much, David, and thank you very much to everyone, especially like to Ono and to Neil for their presentation. We have been going through the selection of this project, and I'm quite familiar with them, but watching the video gives another pulse of inspiration. It's really moving, and it's very interesting to see all these good practices and successes. So congratulations again. I think that this is a real source of inspiration for our work at UN Habitat. And I also wanted to say, David, that on behalf of UN Habitat, we have seen our executive director in the video, but we are particularly proud of the partnership with World Habitat over the years. It has been a very successful experience. It started a very long time ago, back in the 70s. Now there is the award since '86. And through that, it was an amazing opportunity also for us to analyze the evolution of the trends in the housing sector globally. And beyond that is not only by identifying successful practices that can be replicated. Beyond that is really the opportunity for sharing knowledge on these very good practices. And we had many good experiences over the past decades. And I think it's really exciting to see that every year we can continue to learn more and more from our partner that we have known also for some time. And we see that there is always innovation and always this energy to make a change to realize the right to adequate housing for everyone on the planet. And I think that this is really moving and very encouraging. This year, I wanted also to mention that, for example, it goes beyond this project. We have another program at Habitat working on migration, and we were very pleased and honored to have the participation of Neil to participate in that and to talk about his experience about this battle against homelessness, and how this can be really bringing value to other cities and to the work of other mayors in the European region. So this is a short example how we can leverage on these good practices. But I think that's also very illustrating. There is also a common trend to this different project, and also we've seen beyond these two projects the richness and the successes from many other practices. It was very difficult to make a short list actually, but having came across now this pandemic with COVID-19, we realized that a real important challenge is really the issues of prevention in our work. And these two projects are also illustrating how we can innovate by preventing future challenges in the field of housing. So I think that this will be another very important point from this point of view. The project in Newcastle was particularly inspiring. I know that Leilani will talk more about that, but the work on homelessness has been at the core of the work of our organization, UN Habitat, over the past 2 years. And Newcastle has been very illustrative for us in order to influence other policymakers to prevent these issues of homelessness, but also to better understand what is actually at stake. It's totally aligned with the outcome of an expert group meeting that UN Habitat hosted in 2019. but also like it echoes very well the first ever United Nations resolution that was approved by member states on homelessness last year in 2020 in June with the ECOSOC resolution. So by promoting this type of practices, we're really like making a change at global level. And Newcastle is really like leading by example with this evidence-based policy by like bringing all the partners together to fight against homelessness. And I think that's very, very inspiring. The project led by Aga Khan Agency for Habitat with ONO also is something that has been very inspiring also for our work. This is like touching two key issues, and it's another priority for UN Habitat, the contribution to reduce the impact on in terms of greenhouse gas emission. Climate change is a major threat, and actually this was this year our main theme for the World Habitat Day that happened last week with the campaign that UN Habitat launched on climate action for cities. So again, something that is like another very key priority on the housing agenda globally, but a very important source of inspiration as well, how to combine traditional knowledge, indigenous peoples, and the use of this technology. So congratulations for the awards winner, but also like special thanks to all the participants to the awards. There are many every year. And because all the projects are really like a very important source of inspiration. Thank you very much, David.
Thank you, Christophe. Fantastic. Thank you very much. I'm delighted to introduce our next panelist, Leilani Thaha, who many of you will know is the Global Director of the Shift, which is an international movement to secure the right to housing. And of course, she is the former UN Special Rapporteur on the right to housing. Leilani is one of the final judges on the awards, so we make recommendations to the final judges. Leilani is one, Maimouna from UN Habitat is the other, and so the decisions that the final judges made are the awards that you see today. Leilani, can I hand over to you?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, David, for inviting me into today's conversation, but also to be one of the judges, final judges of the awards. I'm going to admit something that maybe I shouldn't, but when I was first approached by World Habitat Awards many moons ago, I was rapporteur, and I thought, oh, awarding things, I don't know. I didn't know how I felt about it, to be honest, because there is so much going on in the world that deserves attention. I thought to myself, is this going to make a difference? And fast forward to now, where I rely on the information I receive from the World Habitat Awards, not just as a judge to make these determinations, but they provide a big, huge binder full of, we create a binder full of incredible projects that are happening around the world to make a difference in the lives of everyday people, projects that I would not otherwise know of, and inspiration I would not otherwise have without what happens through this process. So while the awards at the end of the day are really amazing, and the awardees should be grateful and thankful and keep doing their great work, there's this whole process that is in and of itself incredibly valuable and incredibly important. So I just wanted to put that out there. It's not something I had anticipated, that the process itself is so very important, and the information you're garnering about a whole number of projects that might not just get an award, but that are very valuable and really important. So I applaud you in your work, and keep going is what I want to say on that front. In terms of the two awardees, it's interesting to me that neither put their works forward necessarily as human rights works. But as a human rights lawyer and advocate, what I see in both of the projects, which are more than just really projects, is sort of fundamental implementation of the right to housing. If I look at Newcastle, it's actually extraordinary what Newcastle has done. And I talk to a lot of cities around the world these days, and I'm privy to what cities are grappling with on the front lines, especially now with the pandemic, but even before, really grappling on the front lines with housing disadvantage, homelessness, inequality, social disruptions of many kinds. And what Newcastle has done is really unique. First of all, we have to understand that homelessness is a prima facie violation of the right to housing. And there's, under international law, there's no other way to slice it. It's so obvious, it's just simply a violation of the right to housing. And that's because it intersects so clearly with the right to life. One's morbidity and mortality is decreased if you're homeless. It intersects with so many other rights, rights to dignity, rights to education, rights to employment, and et cetera. And so in that fundamental way, trying to prevent homelessness is a human rights act by the city. And obviously for that, that just deserves applause right away, because that's what should happen. City governments and all governments should be striving as hard as they can to prevent homelessness, because it is a violation, a fundamental violation of human rights. But Newcastle goes way beyond that, in that the model is holistic and integrative. So it asks, if we tinker over here at this, over in this policy area that may not seem like it has anything to do with housing and homelessness, it might. It understands that there are many moving parts that create homelessness and that lend themselves to homelessness, and that only by embracing all of them and all actors working together can homelessness be prevented. And it's for that reason that I was happy to award Newcastle the award, because it is a model, and it's a model for other cities. As I said, I work with many cities, and getting the moving parts to collaborate and work together is no easy task. Just even conceptually, it's not easy. For governments to understand that what happens in terms of zoning and planning might actually have an impact on housing and homelessness is no, it's not easy to convince cities of that. So I just wanted to say that I think it's hugely important what's happened there, and a model. And even if it's not scalable at this time because of perhaps politics in the United Kingdom, it's certainly scalable across jurisdictions to other cities. There's no doubt in my mind about that. I myself have relied on the model in my work with cities here in Canada, for example, and it has generated much interest. I do want to just say one thing also about the awardee out of Pakistan. One of the things that struck me right away was the harnessing of Indigenous knowledge. And I think I said that in the video comments that were played. I haven't seen the video, but I recall saying that because I was struck by that. And I suppose it's actually what makes it most interesting. Well, one, Indigenous knowledge is often appropriated without acknowledgement. So that was not the case here. I mean, it was understood that this was Indigenous knowledge that was being harnessed. And what was interesting was that it was side by side with modern technology, the most modern technology. And that's something you don't see. A lovely interaction between Indigenous knowledge and new ways of thinking and new ways of doing things through digital means. And so again, Christophe already said the preventative nature of both awardees is super important, because what we're trying from a human rights point of view to do is to prevent violations of human rights. And that's what both of these projects do. And I just want to, again, applaud you, both projects, for really amazing work and inspiring people like me, and hopefully many others around the world. Thanks.
Alani, thank you. Your insight always adds such huge value to the awards, and grateful for all of your input over the years and for your comments today. But do hang on, I know there's questions coming in that I'd like to put to you in a little while. I want to move on to the third of our awards today. This is a new one for us. The Outstanding Contribution to Housing Awards is something that we have not awarded before, but I think the urgency of the housing challenges means that it's not good enough just to have a good idea. You need to be able to grow that idea until it matches the scale of the problem. And I think no organisation represents this better than Techo. I sometimes sort of think back and think, well, what have I done over the last 25 years? I'll tell you what Techo has done. Is they've come from nothing to become the largest housing NGO in Latin America, housing over 100,000 people in housing need. It's extraordinary achievement, and that's why we established this special award to recognise what they have done. And I'm delighted to be joined by Hector Guarda Diaz, who is the chair of the board of Techo, and formerly, I think, a volunteer for many years with the organisation. Can I hand over to you, Hector, for a few comments?
Muchas gracias, David. Gracias a ti y a todo el equipo que nos han llenado de orgullo en este tiempo, porque nos hacen reconocer nuestros 24 años en nuestra América Latina y el Caribe tan herido por las desigualdades que golpean a nuestra región. Darles las gracias porque nos visibilizan y junto con nosotros como Techo también a las miles de familias que confían en nuestro trabajo en toda América Latina y el Caribe, y a los millones de voluntarias y voluntarios que semana a semana, año a año vienen trabajando y colaborando con Techo a lo largo de toda nuestra región. Para nosotros nos llena de orgullo, David, nos llena de orgullo poder contar con ustedes, de poder estar sentados virtualmente en esta mesa, donde queremos reconocer el impacto precioso que ha generado Techo en América Latina y el Caribe. Para nosotros nos llena de orgullo este trabajo que comienza silenciosamente, pequeñamente en Chile y luego agarra con mucha fuerza a lo largo de toda nuestra América Latina. Nuestro enfoque que se inspira en un trabajo coordinado, colaborativo, cogestionado entre las comunidades de los asentamientos, el voluntario, las voluntarias, los donantes, el mundo civil, el mundo público, el mundo privado. Queremos congregar a todas nuestras comunidades, tanto de la sociedad, para poder en ayuda de las familias que están hoy día cada vez más silenciadas, ocultadas en los asentamientos precarios de nuestras comunidades. De alguna manera, Techo, podemos decir que somos rehenes de la esperanza. Nosotros vemos en nuestra América Latina que está siendo cada vez más golpeada por las miserias, desplazada a vivir entre el barro, la lluvia, las catástrofes naturales, en medio de tantas riquezas naturales, por un lado, y con las riquezas de la humanidad que congregan, que compartimos en nuestro continente. Nos pasa que vemos que durante el año 69 el ser humano ha querido llegar a la luna. Hoy día el ser humano está queriendo comprar pasajes para ir fuera de la Tierra a visitar otros lugares, a explorar, pero hay millones de familias hoy día en América Latina que ni siquiera cuentan con un piso firme donde comenzar a soñar. Familias que se viven entre el barro en sus comunidades, los niños que no tienen acceso al baño, que no tienen acceso al agua potable, que no tienen acceso a los servicios con que cuenta la ciudad. Eso nos moviliza plenamente y nos ha movilizado en estos casi 25 años que llevamos como organización. Nos llena profundamente de esperanza, de desafío, de seguir contribuyendo para que las familias cuenten con una vivienda digna. Sabemos que esta vivienda no es la definitiva, la vivienda de emergencia, pero es un piso firme donde comenzar a soñar. Familias que viven entre el barro, la lluvia, la miseria, la precariedad. Como Techo queremos partir colaborando con la familia de los asentamientos a que puedan comenzar a soñar en un espacio firme. Y desde ahí, con el trabajo con las lideresas de las comunidades, donde el 85% de las lideresas, los líderes de nuestras comunidades son mujeres, y ellas nos ayudan a formar, a trabajar en conjunto para buscar soluciones también que sean comunitarias. Hoy día necesitamos unir fuerza. Por eso, Techo, gracias a ustedes por este reconocimiento, porque nos han permitido decir de alguna manera que este sueño hoy día se hace realidad y es cada vez más necesario. Vemos hoy día el producto de la pandemia, donde 209 millones de personas viven en condición de pobreza en nuestra región. La pandemia ha hecho crecer en 22 millones de personas que han sido arrastradas a vivir en pobreza producto de la pandemia. Hoy día nos moviliza precisamente esos sueños para que no queden frustrados. No es justo que hoy día hayan hombres y mujeres de primera y segunda categoría. Nosotros queremos seguir trabajando y eso nos impulsan ustedes hoy día a que podemos creer y trabajar por una Latinoamérica donde todos tengan acceso a la ciudad. Pero primero necesitamos que las familias más pobres puedan contar con un piso firme, que puedan contar con un espacio digno donde comenzar a soñar. Y desde ahí el trabajo mancomunado que tenemos, que posibilitamos a través de los diagnósticos comunitarios, dentro de eso priorizando las necesidades de las comunidades, vemos qué tipo de ayudas más comunitarias podemos seguir trabajando, porque sabemos que el tejido social que hay que reconstruirlo, recomponiendo. Sabemos profundamente, y en eso el Techo, como organización, tenemos un tremendo desafío, que es generar la cultura del encuentro. Necesitamos que el ser humano se encuentre los más ricos con los más pobres, se encuentre con los que toman las decisiones, con aquellos que padecen esas decisiones. Sabemos profundamente que solamente vamos a poder cambiar la realidad de América Latina y el Caribe si facilitamos esa cultura del encuentro, si podemos encontrarnos en esta América Latina herida y maltratada. Así que una vez más, muchas gracias y confiamos profundamente que voluntarios, voluntarias, jóvenes, que el mundo privado, que el mundo público, que la organización de la sociedad civil, que las instituciones internacionales, podamos mirar a América Latina, podamos trabajar por este continente tan desigual. Queremos seguir trabajando como lo hacemos desde un México hasta Chile, pasando por un Haití. Un Haití, sabemos, muy golpeado por el terremoto recientemente, pero que ha quedado olvidado. Ya no es noticia Haití. No es noticia porque sabemos nosotros que cuando golpea a los más pobres, a los que nadie visibiliza, es muy difícil que podamos mirar y trabajar en conjunto. Por eso, gracias porque ustedes nos ayudan a visibilizar las heridas que todavía sangran en América Latina y el Caribe.
Hector, thank you. That was inspiring, and I think we're all incredibly impressed by the scale at which you have managed to achieve and the ambition that you still show. And there's questions coming in, which I've got ready for you in a few minutes. So please do stay there. I'd like to introduce Dr. Claudia Murray. Claudia is a research fellow at the School of Real Estate and Planning at University of Reading in England. And she's also a fellow of the Centre for Latin American and Caribbean Studies for the University of London. And Claudia is another one of the members of the advisory group of the awards that shortlisted these and many others over the years, Claudia. But with your knowledge, particular knowledge of Latin America, I'd love your comments about what you just heard from Techo.
Yes, hello everyone, and thank you very much, David. I would like to just first of all say congratulations to Techo for this award, and Hector mentioned the key for the success of the organization, and David, you also mentioned as well the size and I add to this that the success that they have in recruiting the young volunteers across many countries in Latin America is helping them to successfully deliver their housing solutions. And I think they also, and I don't know whether this is willingly or not, but they are also very cleverly exploiting other things that the region has. For example, the language, the commonality of the language. You know, we have many indigenous language, languages in the region, but we also have, lots of us share Spanish, and the differences between Brazil, you know, Portuguese and Spanish is not that great. I speak from a family that has Brazilians and Argentinians, and we speak Portuñol in my family all together. So that's one of the things that they managed to do. They exploited that. They took advantage of the language. And also they took advantage of the culture, because you know, we seen Omo was mentioning about the indigenous resources, and they're taking advantage of the cultural the resource sharing in indigenous cultures in Latin America is well known. And also the other thing that they're taking advantage is in the idea of progressive housing. We know about progressive housing in Latin America through the work of John Turner in Peru, but I argue in my work that this goes back beyond that time, the 1960s, when John Turner was researching in Peru, and this goes back to the time of the colonization, when Spanish migrants were arriving to the region. They were building one room and waiting for the rest of the family to arrive, and then progressively adding to the house. So these components of language, indigenous sharing of resources, and progressive housing, I think Techo is quite cleverly building on all these things that they are sharing in different countries in Latin America, and that's what I think is part of their success. And the other thing that they are very successful is at providing skills, and also at empowering communities in the region. You know, Leliane was mentioned about human rights, and they certainly help communities to understand their right to shelter, and they empower them, or they give them a voice, or if not, they help them to find their voice to solve their problems. And also in terms of more technical skills, when the communities participate in the project, and like Hector was saying, some of these families, they don't, you know, they don't have access to any basic sanitation, let alone a decent education sometimes. So to find a way out of this situation, working in the construction sector for these families is one solution to their employment problems. And these are all the things that I think are part of the components of Techo that they are making them to be so successful and so large in the region. But I also think that you know, this is for everyone winning an award. You know, it's great to win an award, but then you immediately, the question comes, what's next? What can I do next with this award? And I think for Techo, I would like to see them thinking about this very carefully on the place they are in Latin America, because I do work on policies and housing programs in Latin America, and what I see is that some of the governments are saying, well, Techo is there to provide this solution, because Techo is so large in the region that they are taking a role there that the governments are ignoring completely the most vulnerable sector of the population, just because Techo is picking up the problem. So what's happening is that Techo is providing temporary solutions, but these temporary solutions are housing for people that they've been living in these places for more than 20 years right now. So maybe they need to start thinking about this temporarily, whether they are solutions they need to be looking at more long term. Hector was clearly talking about meeting different sectors, getting involved with the private and the public sector. So there is a space there to consider the environment. For example, you know, I've been in presentation from Techo that I saw them talking already about urban issues, urban planning, and climate change, and how their work is impacting on a resource finite, a resource that is finite, like land, and also how their work is impacting on the carbon footprint, because there's a lot of embodied carbon in these transitional solutions. So I think all of these is giving Techo an opportunity to think, okay, can we in the future be looking at solutions as maybe they can become the next housing association, not the next, but the first, because housing associations, they do not exist in Latin America. So maybe they could be the first housing association in Latin America, or maybe they could be the first organization that clearly that's very well placed. They're very well placed to upscale solutions like community land trust. And all these solutions, housing associations and community land trust, these are well-known solutions for that World Habitat has examples, really good examples. And I think this is the area that maybe Techo and World Habitat can work together in providing this next step for Techo, whether they can take a more permanent role in the solutions that are provided for the most vulnerable in Latin America. So thank you, David.
Thank you, Claudia. Fantastic insight and some challenges there as well. What we're going to do is hopefully you're going to see your screen change, and we're going to move into a Q&A. We've got lots of questions. I'm not sure we're going to get through all of them, but I'm gonna make a start anyway. Perhaps if I can take there's a couple of questions which are quite similar. They're around the point that Claudia just made, really, about the role of governments and the roles of NGOs and governments, and is it the role of NGOs like Techo? Should we be supporting the work that they are doing, or does that in a sense let governments off the hook? And I'm just interested in your response to that, Leilani, because I think it impacts on a number of the things that we've heard today.
Yes, I was struck by the comments Claudia made about the role that Techo plays, and then how it absolves governments of their responsibilities. And this is a big problem. It's not to say Techo shouldn't play the role it's playing. It's playing an essential role. It does it well. It's close to the people. I loved Hector's comments, the bringing of visibility to the invisible, the recognition of those without, and how those without are so easily ignored by governments and people with political power, and the role that Techo plays in seeing those people and addressing their needs. So you don't want Techo to stop playing that role, but governments need to understand that actually the primary responsibility for implementing human rights lies with governments, and where that is being done by another actor, that actor needs the resources and competencies to do that well, and to do it in a way that has long-term impact. Claudia mentioned, Techo was originally like to deal with emergent need on an emergency basis. And yet what's happened is their works have become long-term. And so governments have to say, okay, and we know in this day and age, governments are not well positioned in some cases to implement human rights well. That it's much better to have an organization like Techo with the expertise, years of experience, trusted by people, much better for Techo to implement human rights. But they absolutely need the resources and the competencies and the capacities, and that has to come from governments. And so I use Techo as the example, but this is the case in many countries around the world where NGOs are playing a really significant role, but they are not always empowered to do so. And so governments have to understand that what's at stake here is human rights. And those are the most important things in the world. It's the highest law of the land, we say. And recognize, therefore, and really put on a, not on a pedestal, but really put as front and center and important the work of NGOs like Techo and others.
Brilliant. Thank you, Leilani. I think this is a question for you, Onno. It's really about how did you build trust, and was there any initial skepticism with the communities that you work with in Pakistan?
Thanks, David. I wouldn't call it skepticism. I would call it almost defeatism. When 25 years ago we started engaging with these communities, many of them said, "Why are you talking about hazard risk? Hazards happen. They're God's will. There's nothing we can do about it. They've happened all the time, and our great-grandparents told us about them." So it took long-term engagement, understanding that it is actually possible to map and understand these risks, showing how you do that. We started with physical maps you saw in the video, but now we can show them on devices, showing them the map, having people see where their houses are so that they can understand the risk, and very importantly, mobilizing people from the community to be first responders, so that the young people in the community bring the messages home, which is a very effective strategy in behavioral change campaigns. But the most important thing is continuing engagement. If we skipped a year of avalanche preparedness before winter, people would no longer act the way they do, because it's a big problem even for governments to get people to respond to early warnings. And just to tie that in with the government question, just like you have to gain the trust of the communities, you have to gain the trust of the government, because the government doesn't just let you fly drones and do mapping in border areas with Afghanistan because they think it's a cool activity. They need to understand why that is helpful to them, why it doesn't undermine but supports, and how it is good for government and the population. So it's a dual confidence building job. For us, a real challenge during COVID was to keep this engagement going when people said you can't go to the communities because you might infect them. And we developed protocols for that, which you know what kind of protocols they were. But in March 2020, nobody yet knew, but we had to make sure we kept those touch points, because trust takes very, very long to earn, but it's very quickly lost. So that continuous engagement is key. Thanks.
Brilliant, thank you. There's a couple of questions here, and I'm just sort of drawn back to I think a brilliant point that Maimouna Sharif made in the video about climate change being a poverty multiplier. And Christoph, I don't know if I can come to you. I mean, there's a danger that the climate crisis is seen as just another problem, but in fact, it's part of every single housing problem that we're talking about. And I just wonder what other agencies should consider. So, you know, if you're not just dealing with climate change, you're a housing provider. What the priorities should be for any housing providers listening at the moment to protect their residents from what is undoubtedly coming.
No, thank you very much, David. I think that's a very key point, and we see actually in our work that the first affected communities by the climate change are usually like the most poor already in the cities. You know, there are people living in slums, there are people living in informal settlements, poor housing conditions for various reasons. Sometimes because they are usually using like lands that are particularly vulnerable, like to floodings, to landslides. But there are many also like other type of impacts. And I'm thinking about the OECD region overall. You know, it's not only like in the global south, people not having like proper insulation in their homes, people not being able like to afford the utility cost to be like able like to live decently in their homes. That's like also like a major issue. So this impact, I mean, this climate that is changing is impacting everyone differently, but it's first and foremost like targeting the lowest income. And so, I mean, this is also like something that we try to address working with the private sector partners, especially with the real estate partners, to try to see not only how we can reduce the cost of new buildings, you know, by promoting new type of technologies, but also like to reduce the cost of the utility bills for the occupants. We are partnering with other global stakeholders, and particularly with the UN Environment Programme, in a joint network that is called the One Planet Network. This is like a very interesting platform that is addressing this issue of sustainable consumption and production. The work on sustainable buildings is a key component of it. Actually, I know that we have developed one proposal for Pakistan that was very much inspired by the excellent project led by Aga Khan. And this platform is also like looking how can we bridge the needs in terms of the right to adequate housing and the needs of sustainable consumption and production, sustainable buildings.
Thank you, Christophe. Fantastic. I think this is a question probably for you, Neil. What can people do to encourage take up of good practices like there's what you are doing in Newcastle? And I think there's a few specific questions which I won't go into because they're quite detailed about the specifics of what you're doing. I just wonder is there a way of simplifying the message of what Newcastle is doing so it can be more easily transferred? To the people in the audience, Neil, who are sort of from NGOs, not from local authorities, what can they do to encourage their own local authorities and their own governments to act more proactively about homelessness prevention?
Yeah, thank you. There is information on our website where people can see some of the tools and products we've used to try and bring people together. But I think it is about connecting with residents, understanding the challenges they face, and learning from every crisis you fail to prevent, and having feedback loops going back. And I think it links very much to what Anu was saying about trust. If your stated aim is to try and prevent homelessness, and that's what our politicians stand up and say, and it's having those feedback loops and those quarterly transparent public events where people can bring challenge. And we don't say we solve everything, but it's going back and learning from every case and trying to refine. And then from that refinement to consolidate. So what starts off as an aim can become a policy. And when it becomes a policy, it can be something that we can be held to account for. Trying and testing new things. I think when the Scottish Government came to Newcastle a few years ago and to look at what we were doing on preventing homelessness as part of their research into making prevention a legal right in Scotland. And they said to Councillor McCarthy, what's your, what's the takeaway point? What's the one thing? And she said, it doesn't happen overnight. You know, I think Arno made that point about long-term approaches. We've got to, you just cannot give up if it doesn't succeed at the first attempt. You've got to keep coming, and you've got to sometimes take the flak that goes with that. I see, with Hector, lots of great things have happened, and then expectations rise, and that can be slightly dispiriting at times, but you have to keep going. And we will, there is information on the website. We are working with the Design Council so that we can consolidate what we've got as part of World Habitat to share, but also to build on, because I don't think ending homelessness, it changes with circumstance, so we have to keep on learning to keep on doing that.
Great, thank you, Neil. There's a series of questions for you, Hector, and I think it's really about what is what is next for Techo? Some people are asking actually whether you're going to come to other parts of the world, whether your ambitions are global. But I'm just interested in your response as well to Claudia's challenge and about your role of influencing governments.
Gracias. Trataré de ser sintético en las dos preguntas. La primera tiene que ver con nuestros retos. América Latina, si bien, como bien dijo Claudia, nuestro primer punto de llegada es la vivienda de emergencia. Luego, a partir de los años, hemos hecho trabajo comunitario, trabajo en infraestructura, y queremos llegar a que las familias lleguen a viviendas definitivas, su última vivienda. Y esa vivienda ya no quizá en el mismo lugar donde están, porque los asentamientos, y hay una clave que ustedes han dicho hoy día. El problema, la crisis climática, es un problema social antes que todo, no es solamente un tema ecológico, porque afectan mayormente a los más pobres, y eso lo encontramos en nuestros asentamientos, donde trabajamos. Encontramos que la gente no tiene acceso al agua. Hay un 90 y tantos % de familias en los asentamientos de América Latina y el Caribe que no llega el agua con acceso formal a su hogar. Hoy día decíamos con el asunto de la pandemia, por ejemplo, que hay que lavarse las manos. ¿Cómo lo vas a hacer cuando hay familias que no tienen ni siquiera agua en sus hogares? Entonces aquí un problema no es solamente de las grandes élites que pensamos en los problemas, sino que algo que ha hecho Techo ha sido precisamente que es el grito del territorio el que nosotros nos queremos acercar. Queremos llegar a esa vivienda definitiva, queremos llegar a esa vivienda con acceso a la ciudad, pero hoy día hay familias que están viviendo en el barro, que el precio de una vivienda, que puede ser definitiva, tú le puedes ayudar hoy día a familias, a 10, 15, 100 familias con el precio de una casa definitiva. Por eso Techo nos preocupa y nos ocupa la urgencia. Primero, pero no es lo único. Queremos llegar a lo definitivo, pero sabemos que es gradual. Así que, ¿cuál es nuestro reto, David? Tú nos preguntabas. Hoy día queremos que las familias puedan acceder a una vivienda definitiva, una vivienda digna y con acceso a la ciudad, a los servicios que tiene la ciudad, para que podamos compartir en la ciudad la educación, el servicio de salud, el acceso a la diversión, al ocio. Eso los más pobres no tienen acceso. Por eso creo hoy día, por lo menos a los 25 años, creo que en el corto plazo nuestro reto sigue siendo América Latina y el Caribe, porque tenemos mucho por hacer. No sabemos quizás qué nos pueda deparar el destino para más adelante, pero sí queremos que Europa, que el norte de América, que los otros lugares del planeta puedan mirar también a América Latina, pero no lo miren como un patio trasero, mírenlo como un espacio lleno de oportunidades. Necesitamos que el charco lo cruce. No miremos solamente lo que tenemos alrededor de Europa. Miren lo que está al otro lado del charco. Necesitamos la ayuda de ustedes. Necesitamos unirnos. No necesitamos que Techo vaya para allá. Necesitamos que ustedes vengan hacia nuestra América Latina y el Caribe. Y por otro lado, David, tú me preguntabas lo que Claudia decía con respecto a la política pública. Mira, un dato, pero 1 de 3 países hoy día en América Latina y el Caribe está en situación de vulnerabilidad financiera. Hay un 7% de contracción económica en la región, más del doble del resto de los países de cualquier otra región del mundo. Un 7% de contracción. Hemos retrocedido décadas en América Latina y el Caribe. Entonces, los países hoy día, las políticas gubernamentales, hoy día están preocupados de otros tópicos. Hay un asunto hoy día que si Techo no se preocupa por la realidad de los asentamientos en América Latina, hoy día no se va a preocupar nadie. El Techo es también un agente que ayuda a fiscalizar lo que hacen los gobiernos, lo que hacen los organismos internacionales, pero también en denunciar lo que no se hace. Y cosas preciosas hemos tenido en América Latina, que en un momento Techo hacía estudios sobre la situación de los asentamientos, donde antes los gobiernos no lo hacían. Hoy día los tenemos en Chile, en Argentina, en México, en varios lugares de América Latina donde los gobiernos han asumido lo que Techo hacía. Eso queremos. El tercer sector, las ONG, no estamos para reemplazar a los gobiernos, pero hay tareas que los gobiernos no hacen y no vamos a esperar a que lo lleguen a hacer mientras hayan familias que hoy día mueren de hambre, no viven en una casa lo suficientemente o primariamente digna, que no cuentan con redes de apoyo. Imagínate, los más pobres de los pobres en América Latina, en los asentamientos que trabajamos, su única red de apoyo somos nosotros. Si no estamos nosotros, no va a estar nadie. Bueno, muchísimas gracias.
Fantastic. Thank you, Hector. And thank you, everybody. Thank you for all of your questions. I'm sorry we didn't get round to asking all of them, but I hope we got a flavour. I just want to say thank you to our fantastic panelists today, to Neil, to Ono, Hector, Christophe, Lilani, and Claudia. Thank you all for your time today and all of the wisdom and knowledge that you've imparted. And I hope everybody has found it as interesting and inspiring as I have. I want to also say thank you to somebody who you haven't really seen on screen at all today, but Abby Stolzfuss, my colleague who has put this event together and has put the video together as well, and has been absolutely fantastic in putting all of those things together so quickly, and the rest of my team at World Habitat who've just done an amazing job getting everything ready for today. There's a few details we'll follow. We'll send you an email with a few points, and that will hopefully get to you tomorrow. There'll be a link so that you can see the video again and a recording of this event if you wanted to see it, and also a few dates for your diary as well. I'm delighted that we are going to be in COP26 with our current Agency for Habitat. We've got a joint event there in Glasgow on November the 8th, and also the events for the awards are coming to the next year as well. So we will be announcing the 2021 awards in December this year, and before you can all even draw a breath, the entries are going to be open for the 2022 awards at the beginning of January, and there's going to be a link sent round, I think, on chat and also in the email to tell you about the details of that. So please, if you've got any more programs and projects which you'd like to enter for the awards, please encourage you to do so. Just want to say thank you to the audience. Fantastic, so many people could join, and thank you for all of your questions and for all of your interest. And we look forward to seeing you again next year with what I hope is another inspirational set of awards. Thank you very much, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you.